This is what happens when you have people in Parliament and running Britain at number 10 who are financially illiterate. So when we spell out quite specifically how Germany is going to benefit by this, by making negative bets with friends like John Paulson and Lloyd Blankfein against Greece, and they go into the credit default swap, and they make negative bets against Greece, and Greece collapses, and they make billions of dollars, and how by having Greece be a basket case, it keeps the euro cheap, which helps Germany, which is a huge export powerhouse, why that's a benefit to them. Now, finally, 10 years later, they say, you know what? Germany did make billions of euros on the destruction of Greece. Guess what? Germany is going to make billions and billions of pounds on the destruction of the UK. That's baked into the cake. It's the Fourth Reich, as I said at the time, is being manifested in real time. And there's Theresa May. Oh, we're going to crush them with Marmite. Ooh.
Well, it's worth also noting that, you know, you mentioned the export figures between the UK and Europe. It wasn't really that where the UK benefited the most. Where they benefited the most was as a sort of, banking center from US and China meets Europe. So they acted as a central clearinghouse for all of that. And now we're seeing signs of banks leaving the UK. But we do have a banking story in the headlines because all of those economies across Europe, whether it's now Italy or prior to that Greece, they collapsed because of banking shenanigans. Let's call them that because, of course, we're talking about a British bank here, and one must only say shenanigans and little mistakes they made.
Oversights.
Inappropriate behavior, really. Terribly horrible. Well, our friend Neil Mitchell is in the news. Neil Mitchell, friend of Keiser report. Well, Lloyd's under pressure as HBOS fraud report is published. So there was an internal Lloyd's banking group report written by a former manager at the bank and published on Tuesday alleges serious misconduct by the lender over the handling and disclosure of fraud at its HBOS Reading unit. The report, written in 2013 after the Lloyd's manager had taken her concerns to the police, alleges HBOS executives knew of the fraud as early as 2004 and failed to properly disclose it, with far-reaching implications given Lloyd's takeover of HBOS in 2009. It also states Lloyd's mishandled its investigation and disclosure of the fraud following that takeover. Now, MPs had pleaded with Lloyd's to please release this to the public. Please show the public, which, by the way, have bailed out your bank and all the other banks and many of the other banks, at least in the United Kingdom, and certainly the financial system itself were bailed out by the inflation tax caused by the quantitative easing. So they said, please, Lloyd's, release that report to the public. And Lloyd said, oh, well, we can't do that because of confidentiality of our clients and our customers and things like this. Well, Neil Mitchell had the report, and he released it in the matter of national interest. He's a Scottish banker.
The attitude toward the consumer in the banking sector in the UK is treat them like mushrooms. You feed them essentially feces, and you keep them in the dark and feed them dog poop, essentially. That's the attitude that the regulators, number 10 Downing Street, everyone who has any oversight capacity whatsoever for the UK banking industry, treat them all like mushrooms. Now, we, of course, were reporting on this in real time. We informed the British public about the frauds that were going on, the massive frauds. Uh-oh, my little camera seems to have become flaccid. Well, put that over there for a second. Maybe I'll go off the air. Go away, camera. I'm taking my microphone off now. I'm tired of it. It's still on, but you have no view. There. How about that? You have to watch the actual show to get the show. You can't just watch my Periscope. So there you have the UK banking system that was caught red-handed, and we reported on this. We said, look, this is how Lloyd's, HBOS, Barclays, all these banks are committing massive fraud. And, of course, the biggest impediment to getting that information to the British public was Ofcom.
Yeah, and the entire system there. As the article in The Guardian notes, okay, The Guardian is important because I'm going to come right back to that. The report has circulated privately among regulators and law enforcement officials for years, but has not been made available to the public. Who chose not to release that to the public? How come it doesn't get released to the public? Well, because of all of these regulations against that sort of speech where, or basically providing information to the peasants that are the public.
That form of speech. Yeah. In other words,
when they say public, they mean peasant. Remember, in the UK, that's important. Yeah, the subjects. So also, look at this tone. Here's a so-called progressive newspaper called The Guardian, and they're called, that's the left wing, and the right wing is the Telegraph, right? Well, look how, this is their own sentence written in this article about Lloyd's. this report released by a Keiser report regular, Neil Mitchell. This shows you the difference between the likes of Keiser report and The Guardian. Here's their assessment. The publication of this report comes at a sensitive time for Lloyd's as it attempts to move past the painful legacy of missteps before and during the financial crisis.
Right.
This is why people tune into Keiser report, not because it makes Putin gleeful and happy. It's because they don't want to hear people say, oh, these little missteps. It's very unfortunate that Scottish businessman Neil Mitchell released this report exposing the fraud and the defrauding of the population of the UK. Well, these are just missteps.
The difference that they show these at the aristocracy is breathtakingly putrid. And so I feel very bad about that Meghan Markle woman who's married.
Meghan Markle.
She married a prince. She now has to live with those slime bags for her entire life and probably spawn another slimy banking poop stain. You made a bad choice. You should have stayed an actress. Anyway, stay tuned for the second half. A lot more coming your way. Don't go away.